The bullet that grazed Juliana Owens's shoulder in Vulture City, Arizona territory, wasn't meant for her, but it changed everything anyway. She stumbled into the dusty street on that scorching July afternoon in 1882, clutching her bleeding arm, watching the two men who'd been shooting at each other scatter in opposite directions as the sheriff's whistle pierced the air. The pain was sharp but manageable. What terrified her more was the attention. People were staring, rushing toward her, asking questions she couldn't answer, questions that would lead to more questions about who she was and where she'd come from. "Madam, let me help you." The voice was deep, steady, and came from a man who appeared at her side before she could protest. He was tall, lean, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His gray eyes held genuine concern, not the curiosity she feared. "I'm Xander Kane. My family's ranch is just outside town. We need to get that wound cleaned before infection sets in." Juliana wanted to refuse, to run, to disappear into the crowd and find somewhere to hide until nightfall when she could slip away from Vulture City, like she'd slipped away from every other place over the past 3 years. But the pain was intensifying, and her vision was starting to blur at the edges. She nodded, hating her weakness, hating that she needed help from anyone. Xander guided her through the dispersing crowd with a firm but gentle hand on her uninjured arm. He led her to a hitching post where a handsome chestnut horse waited patiently. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes," she managed, though mounting was going to be excruciating. He seemed to sense this, and before she could move, he'd swung up into the saddle and extended his hand down to her. "I'll pull you up behind me. Hold on with your good arm." The ride to the Kane Ranch took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Juliana pressed her face against Xander's back, breathing through the pain, trying not to think about the blood soaking through her dress sleeve. She couldn't afford a doctor. She couldn't afford anyone looking too closely at her or asking for her name to be written down in any official capacity. The Kane Ranch appeared through the heat shimmer like a mirage. It wasn't the largest spread she'd seen, but it was well maintained. The main house was built from adobe and wood, with a wide porch that promised shade and relief from the brutal Arizona sun. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. "Ma, we've got an injured woman," Xander called as he helped Juliana down from the horse. An older woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of blood. "Bring her inside, quickly." "Xander, get the medical supplies from the cabinet." Juliana found herself seated at a sturdy kitchen table while Xander's mother, who introduced herself as Margaret Kane, carefully cut away the blood-soaked sleeve of her dress. The wound wasn't as bad as it had felt. The bullet had merely grazed her, leaving a deep furrow in the flesh of her upper arm. "You're lucky," Margaret said, her voice kind but matter-of-fact. "Another inch to the right and this would be much worse. I'm going to clean it with whiskey. It's going to hurt." "I understand," Juliana said softly. The pain of the whiskey was white-hot and immediate, but Juliana bit down on her lip and refused to cry out. She'd endured worse, so much worse. When Margaret began wrapping the wound with clean bandages, Juliana finally allowed herself to breathe normally again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you, I should go. I don't want to be any trouble." "Go where?" Xander asked, leaning against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed. It wasn't an aggressive posture, but there was something protective in the way he looked at her. "That wound needs to be watched for infection. You need rest and proper food. I can take care of myself." "I'm sure you can," Margaret said gently, "but that doesn't mean you should have to. Stay for supper at least. You've had a shock and you've lost blood. Where are you staying in town?" Juliana hesitated too long. She saw the understanding dawn in both their faces. She had nowhere to stay. She'd arrived in Vulture City that very morning on the stage coach with nothing but a small carpet bag and the last of her money sewn into the hem of her dress. "We have a spare room," Margaret said before Juliana could formulate a lie. "It's small, but it's clean and private. You're welcome to it for as long as you need." "I can't pay you." "We didn't ask you to," Xander said. His tone was gentle but firm. "Ma's right, you need rest. Stay tonight at least. Tomorrow you can decide what you want to do." Juliana wanted to argue, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that the immediate crisis had passed. She nodded, just once, and saw the relief in their faces. The spare room was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed, washstand, and wooden chair it contained. But it was spotlessly clean, and the window looked out over the ranch's eastern pasture, where the setting sun was painting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Juliana sat on the edge of the bed, her injured arm throbbing, and allowed herself something she rarely permitted. She cried quietly, her tears a release of tension and fear and the bone-deep weariness that came from 3 years of running. A soft knock on the door made her quickly wipe her eyes. "Yes, it's just me," Margaret's voice came through the wood. "I brought you a clean dress. It was mine when I was younger. You're about the same size I was then, and there's water in the pitcher if you'd like to wash up. Supper will be ready in an hour." "Thank you," Juliana called back, hearing footsteps retreat down the hallway. She stood and examined the dress Margaret had left on the chair. It was simple, practical cotton in a soft blue color, far better quality than the threadbare thing she was wearing. Juliana washed her face and hands, carefully avoiding her bandaged arm, and changed into the dress. It fit remarkably well. She brushed out her long auburn hair, normally kept in a severe bun, and caught her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. She barely recognized herself. Her green eyes looked huge in her pale face, and there were shadows beneath them that spoke of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. She looked older than her 23 years, older and harder and infinitely tired. Supper was a quiet affair. Margaret had made beef stew with fresh bread, and Juliana ate ravenously despite her intention to show more restraint. There was another person at the table, a weathered man in his 60s who was introduced as Henry, a ranch hand who'd been with the Kane family for over 20 years. "Heard about the shooting in town," Henry said, his voice rough but not unkind. "Sheriff catch either of those fools?" "I heard he got them both," Xander replied, passing Juliana the bread basket. "They were arguing over a card game from what people were saying. Damned idiots could have killed someone." "Nearly did," Margaret said pointedly. Juliana kept her eyes on her plate, uncomfortable with being the center of attention even indirectly. She could feel Xander watching her, his curiosity evident but not pushy. She appreciated that more than he could know. After dinner, she offered to help with the dishes, but Margaret waved her away. "You need rest. That arm needs to heal. Go on to bed." Juliana retreated gratefully to her small room. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied softly. The evening breeze carried the scent of sage and dust through the open window. It was peaceful in a way she'd almost forgotten existed. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of roosters crowing. Her arm was stiff and sore, but the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. She dressed carefully and made her way to the kitchen, following the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Margaret was at the stove, and Xander sat at the table with a ledger spread before him, making notations with a pencil. He looked up when she entered, and his face brightened with a smile that transformed his serious features. "Good morning. How's the arm?" "Better, thank you." Juliana accepted the coffee Margaret poured for her and sat down carefully. "I need to ride into town today for supplies," Margaret said. "You're welcome to come along if you're feeling up to it, Juliana, or you can rest here, whatever you prefer." The thought of going back into town, where people had seen her bleeding and vulnerable, made Juliana's stomach clench. "If it's all the same, I'd rather stay here. But I should help with something. I don't want to be useless." "Can you sew?" Margaret asked. "Yes, quite well." "Then you can help me with mending when I get back. I have a basket full of shirts and trousers that need attention. The men around here are hard on their clothes." Margaret shot a mock stern look at Xander, who grinned unrepentantly. After breakfast, Margaret headed to town with Henry driving the wagon, and Xander disappeared to work with the cattle. Juliana found herself alone in the house for the first time. She wandered through the rooms, not snooping but simply observing. This was a home, not just a house. There were photographs on the walls, books on shelves, small touches that spoke of lives lived and memories cherished. A quilted throw on the sofa, a pipe rack by the fireplace, wildflowers in a vase on the mantel. She was studying a photograph of a younger Margaret and a handsome man who must have been Xander's father when she heard footsteps on the porch. Xander appeared in the doorway, his shirt dusty and his face sheened with sweat. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," he said. "Just came back for some rope. There's a section of fence down in the north pasture." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "That's my father. He died 2 years ago, thrown from a horse." "I'm sorry," Juliana said softly. "Thank you." Xander found the rope he needed and hesitated at the door. "I know you probably want your privacy, but if you get bored or lonely, you're welcome to come out to the barn. I'll be working with some of the horses this afternoon." After he left, Juliana tried to settle down with a book from the shelf, but she couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept drifting to Xander Kane and his steady gray eyes, to the kindness he and his mother had shown a complete stranger. She wasn't used to kindness without strings attached. She'd learned the hard way that most people wanted something in return. Around midday, restlessness drove her outside. She walked slowly, favoring her injured arm, and made her way to the barn. The interior was dim and cool, smelling of hay and leather and horses. She heard Xander's voice before she saw him, speaking in low, soothing tones. He was in a corral attached to the barn, working with a young bay horse that danced nervously at the end of a long lead rope. Xander moved with patient confidence, never rushing, never forcing. Gradually, the horse calmed, its ears swiveling forward with interest rather than fear. Juliana leaned against the fence rail and watched, fascinated. There was something almost hypnotic about the way Xander worked, the quiet authority in his movements, the gentleness in his hands when he finally approached the horse close enough to touch its neck. He noticed her after several minutes and smiled. "This is Copper. Got him from a rancher near Phoenix. He'd been mistreated, so he's learning to trust again." "He's beautiful," Juliana said. "He will be once he settles. Would you like to come in?" Slow movements, quiet voice. Sometimes having someone else around helps them get used to people again. Juliana climbed carefully over the fence, aware of Xander watching to make sure she didn't jostle her injured arm. She approached slowly, following his lead. The horse's eyes were large and dark and wary, but after a moment he stretched his neck toward her, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. "Let him come to you," Xander murmured. She stood perfectly still, and after what felt like an eternity, Copper took a tentative step forward and blew warm breath across her outstretched hand. Something inside Juliana's chest loosened at the contact. "You're good with him," Xander observed. "Have you worked with horses before?" "My father bred them." Juliana said before she could stop herself. Then she froze, realizing what she'd revealed. She so rarely spoke about her past that it shocked her when details slipped out. If Xander noticed her sudden tension, he didn't comment on it. That explains it. They can tell when someone understands them. He ran his hand along Copper's neck. I think that's enough for today. Don't want to push too hard too fast. They walked back to the barn together, Copper following docilely now that the lesson was done. Xander showed her how he measured out the feed, explaining his philosophy about horse care with an enthusiasm that was quietly infectious. My father taught me everything, he said. He believed that how you treat your animals says everything about your character. Respect them, care for them properly, and they'll give you everything they have. He sounds like he was a good man. The best. Xander's voice was thick with emotion. I miss him every day, but I try to honor his memory by running this ranch the way he would have wanted. They were standing close together in the dim barn, and Juliana became suddenly aware of how tall Xander was, how solid his presence felt. It would be so easy to lean into that strength, to let someone else carry the burden she'd been shouldering alone for so long. The temptation terrified her. She stepped back, putting distance between them. I should go back to the house. Your mother will be home soon. If Xander was disappointed by her retreat, he hid it well. Of course. Thank you for helping with Copper. Margaret returned with the wagon full of supplies and a basket of mending that proved to be as extensive as she'd promised. Juliana spent the afternoon sitting on the porch, her needle flashing in the sunlight as she repaired torn seams and replaced missing buttons. The work was soothing, repetitive, allowing her mind to drift. She'd been 16 when her father died, leaving her alone with debts she couldn't pay and men who came calling with threats. She'd been 17 when Marcus Thornton arrived, charming and wealthy, offering to clear those debts in exchange for her hand in marriage. She'd been too young and desperate to see the darkness behind his handsome face. The marriage had been a nightmare. Marcus was cruel, possessive, and violent. He isolated her from the few friends she had, controlled every aspect of her life, and when she displeased him, which was often, he made sure she understood his displeasure through fists and worse. She'd endured 2 years of hell before she found the courage to run. That had been 3 years ago. 3 years of moving from town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to be found, working whatever jobs she could find, always looking over her shoulder. Marcus had connections, money, and an obsessive determination to find her. She'd heard stories of other women he'd tracked down after they fled. The stories never ended well. That's beautiful work. Margaret's voice pulled her from the dark spiral of her thoughts. The older woman had come out onto the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to Juliana and sat in the rocking chair beside her. You weren't exaggerating about your sewing skills. Thank you. My mother taught me before she died. You've had loss in your life, Margaret said quietly. It wasn't a question. Juliana's hand stilled on the shirt she was mending. She didn't know how to respond without revealing too much or lying outright, so she said nothing. Forgive me, Margaret continued. I don't mean to pry. It's just that I recognize the look in your eyes. I've seen it in my own mirror. I lost a daughter when she was just 5 years old. Fever took her fast. For a long time after, I felt like I was just going through the motions of living without really being alive. I'm sorry, Juliana whispered. It gets easier, but it never really goes away. The grief, I mean. But eventually, you learn to carry it differently. You learn that you can honor what you've lost while still building something new. Margaret sipped her lemonade, her gaze distant. What I'm trying to say, poorly perhaps, is that whatever you're running from, you don't have to run from it alone. You have a place here for as long as you need it. Tears pricked at Juliana's eyes. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you're hurt and scared. I know you're alone. That's all I need to know to offer help." Margaret reached over and patted Juliana's hand. "Besides, Xander likes you." "What? No, I've only been here a day." "Exactly, and he's already looking at you the way his father used to look at me. Xander's a good judge of character. If he's drawn to you, there's a reason for it." Juliana didn't know what to say to that. The idea of Xander being interested in her romantically was both thrilling and terrifying. She couldn't let herself get attached. She couldn't put these kind people in danger by staying too long. But as the days passed, staying became easier. Her arm healed cleanly, the wound closing without infection. She fell into a routine of helping Margaret with cooking and household tasks, spending afternoons with Xander and the horses, learning to navigate the rhythms of ranch life. She tried to tell herself she was just recovering her strength before moving on, but the truth was harder to admit. She was happier than she'd been in 6 years. Xander was unlike any man she'd ever known. He was patient and gentle, with a quiet strength that never felt threatening. He told terrible jokes that made her laugh despite herself. He taught her to rope fence posts and showed her the best places to watch the sunset. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel anything less than respected. 2 weeks after her arrival, they were riding together to check on the cattle in the far pasture. Juliana had become a confident rider again, the skills from her childhood returning quickly. The Arizona landscape stretched around them in shades of gold and rust and deep blue sky. "Can I ask you something?" Xander said as they let their horses walk side by side. Juliana tensed reflexively. "You can ask. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I've been wondering about your family. You have people somewhere who might be worrying about you." The question was so careful, so considerately phrased that Juliana felt her defenses crumble slightly. "No, my parents are both dead. I have no siblings. There's no one." "What about friends, people you left behind?" She shook her head. "I have no one." Xander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. "That must be lonely. It's safer." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Safer than what?" Juliana pulled her horse to a stop. They were on a slight rise, overlooking the ranch buildings in the distance. The wind tugged at her hair and the sun was warm on her shoulders. She looked at Xander, at his patient, concerned face, and something inside her broke open. "I have a past," she whispered. Xander guided his horse closer until their legs were nearly touching. He reached out and gently took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused and steady. "We all do, but our future starts today." The simple acceptance in those words undid her completely. Juliana began to talk, haltingly at first, then in a rush. She told him about Marcus, about the marriage that became a prison, about the night she finally fled with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's wedding ring sewn into her hem. She told him about the fear that had been her constant companion, the way she jumped at shadows, the nightmares that still woke her gasping in the dark. Xander listened without interrupting, his hand never leaving hers. When she finally fell silent, emotionally exhausted, he spoke with a fierce intensity that surprised her. "He doesn't deserve you, he never did, and he'll never touch you again, I swear it. You don't understand. Marcus has money connections. He knows people everywhere. If he finds me here, if he hurts you or your mother because of me, I couldn't live with myself. Juliana, look at me." She met his eyes, those steady gray eyes that had become so familiar. "I'm not afraid of some Eastern dandy with more money than sense. This is Arizona territory. Things are different out here. A man's judged by his character, not his bank account, and any man who'd raise his hand to a woman has no character at all. But no buts. You're safe here. You belong here with us, with me." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I know it's too soon, and I know you've been through hell, but I need you to know something. I'm falling in love with you, Juliana Owens. Have been since the moment I saw you standing in that street, bleeding but unbowed. You're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever met, and I want nothing more than to spend every day proving to you that not all men are monsters." Juliana's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Xander, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm capable of loving anyone after everything that's happened. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. I'm just asking you to stay. Let me earn your trust. Let me show you what real love looks like. And if someday you find you can return my feelings, that will be the greatest gift I could ever receive." She wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being wanted to say yes, but fear still had its claws in her heart. "What if he finds me? Then we'll deal with it. Together. You're not alone anymore, Juliana. Not unless you choose to be." She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was stroking gentle circles on her palm. The gesture was so tender, so full of unspoken promise, that she felt something frozen inside her begin to thaw. "I want to stay," she admitted. "I'm just so afraid." "Fear is normal. It's what you do with that fear that matters. And I think you've proven over and over that you're not someone who lets fear control you. You survived, Juliana. You got away from a terrible situation, and you've been taking care of yourself ever since. That takes courage most people don't have." They rode back to the ranch in a new kind of silence, one that felt full of possibility rather than awkwardness. Margaret took one look at their faces when they returned and smiled knowingly, but she asked no questions. That evening, after supper, Xander asked Juliana to walk with him. They strolled through the evening coolness, past the barn and the corrals, out to where a large cottonwood tree stood by itself near a small creek. "This was my sister's favorite spot," Xander said. "Emma. She died when I was 12 and she was 5. I come here sometimes when I need to think or when I need to feel close to her again. Your mother mentioned her. I'm sorry you lost her. Me too. But losing her taught me something important. Life's too short to waste time on fear or regret. You have to grab happiness where you find it and hold on tight." He turned to face her fully. "I know I said I wouldn't push, and I meant it, but I want you to know that everything I said today, I meant that too. I love you, Juliana. And I'll wait as long as it takes for you to feel safe enough to love me back." Juliana reached up and touched his face, letting her fingers trace the line of his jaw. "I think I might already be falling in love with you. That terrifies me more than anything else. Because love makes you vulnerable. Yes. Then we'll be vulnerable together, and we'll be stronger for it." Xander leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, when she instead tilted her face up to meet him, he kissed her with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. It was nothing like kissing Marcus had been. There was no demand in Xander's kiss, no sense of ownership or control. It was a question and a promise, tender and searching, asking permission with every breath. Juliana kissed him back, pouring 3 years of loneliness and longing into the contact, and felt something inside her chest crack wide open. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Please stay." "I'll stay," she whispered back. "I'll try." The weeks that followed were the happiest Juliana could remember since childhood. She threw herself into ranch life, learning everything she could, determined to be useful rather than a burden. She learned to make butter and cheese, to preserve vegetables, to handle a rifle for protection against rattlesnakes and the occasional coyote. She continued working with the horses, discovering a particular talent for calming nervous animals. Xander courted her with a sweetness that constantly surprised her. He brought her wildflowers, taught her to identify constellations in the vast Arizona sky, carved her a small wooden horse that she kept on the table beside her bed. He held her when the nightmares came, whispering reassurances until the terror faded and she could sleep again. Margaret watched it all with quiet approval, and Juliana grew to love the older woman like the mother she'd lost so young. They spent long afternoons on the porch, shelling peas or snapping beans, talking about everything and nothing. Margaret told stories about Xander's childhood, about his father's courtship, about the early days of building the ranch from nothing. "You're good for him," Margaret said one afternoon. "I haven't seen him this happy since before his father died. You've brought light back into this house." "He's good for me too," Juliana admitted. "I never thought I'd feel safe again, but I do when I'm with him. That's how it should be. Love isn't about possession or control. It's about partnership and respect and choosing each other every single day." Margaret paused in her work. "Has he asked you to marry him yet?" Juliana blushed. "No, it's too soon. We've only known each other 2 months. When you know, you know. His father proposed after 3 weeks, and we were married 43 years before God called him home. Time doesn't matter as much as certainty does." But Xander seemed content to let their relationship develop at its own pace. Summer faded into early fall, and the brutal heat eased into warm days and cool nights. The ranch work continued, the rhythm of it becoming as natural to Juliana as breathing. She was checking on the chickens one morning when Henry came running from the barn, his weathered face tight with concern. "Miss Juliana, there's men coming up the road. 3 of them on horseback. Don't recognize them." Fear spiked through her instantly. "Where's Xander?" "North pasture with the hands. Won't be back for hours." "Get Margaret inside. Lock the doors." Juliana's voice was steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. "What about you? I'll handle this. Just keep her safe." Henry looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Juliana's face stopped him. He hurried toward the house while Juliana forced herself to walk calmly to the porch. Her mind was racing. If this was Marcus, if he'd finally found her, she needed to keep him away from the house, away from the people who'd become her family. The 3 riders came into clear view, and Juliana's worst fears were confirmed. Marcus Thornton rode in the center, looking exactly as she remembered. Handsome in a cold, sharp way, impeccably dressed despite the dust of travel, with eyes like chips of ice. The men flanking him were clearly hired muscle, the kind of men who did unpleasant work for unpleasant money. Marcus's face broke into a smile when he saw her, but there was no warmth in it. "Juliana, my dear wife, you've led me on quite a chase. I'm not your wife anymore. I left you 3 years ago. The marriage is over." "The marriage is over when I say it's over. You took vows before God for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death do us part." He dismounted with practiced grace. "Did you really think you could just leave? That I wouldn't find you? How did you find me?" Her voice was calmer than she felt. "I have resources, my dear. It took time, but I'm a patient man. When I heard about a young woman matching your description who was shot in Vulture City, I knew I had you. There's only one ranch out here that would take in strays." He started walking toward her, and Juliana forced herself not to back away. "Now, you're going to gather your things and we're going to go home, and you're going to be very, very sorry for the trouble you've caused me." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Marcus's smile disappeared. "Don't make this difficult, Juliana. I've come too far and spent too much money to leave without you. Be reasonable." "Reasonable? You beat me, Marcus. You terrorized me. You made my life a living hell. I'd rather die than go back with you." "That can be arranged." His voice was cold now, all pretense of civility gone. But first, I think I'll burn this ranch to the ground. Maybe shoot that old woman I saw scurrying into the house. Send a message about what happens when people harbor my property. I'm not your property, you're my wife. Same thing. Now, are you coming peacefully, or do I need to get creative? A voice rang out from behind the barn. She's not going anywhere with you. Xander emerged, rifle in hand, his face set in hard lines Juliana had never seen before. Behind him came 4 ranch hands, all armed. They must have been closer than Henry thought, must have seen the riders approaching and come back at a run. Marcus barely glanced at them. This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. This is between a man and his wife. She's not your wife anymore. She hasn't been for 3 years. And you're on my land, threatening my family. That makes it very much my concern. Xander moved to stand beside Juliana, not in front of her as if she needed shielding, but beside her as an equal partner. You need to leave, now. Or what? You'll shoot me. I'm a respected businessman from Boston. I have lawyers, political connections. You're nobody. A dirt farmer playing at being a rancher. If I die here, there will be consequences that will destroy you. Maybe, Xander acknowledged. Or maybe I'm a property owner defending his home and family from trespassers making threats. That plays pretty well with Arizona juries. Want to test it? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Marcus's face. He'd been counting on intimidation and the weight of his money and status. He hadn't expected resistance, certainly not armed resistance from multiple men who looked like they knew how to use their weapons. This isn't over, Marcus said finally. Juliana is still legally my wife. I have the law on my side. Actually, you don't. Margaret's voice came from the porch. She walked out calmly, carrying a sheaf of papers. After Juliana told us her story, I had my lawyer in Phoenix look into things. Arizona territory recognizes legal separation after continuous abandonment of the marital home for a period exceeding 2 years. You've been living in Boston. Juliana's been in the territory. The marriage is legally void. These papers make it official. Juliana stared at Margaret in shock. You did that for me, of course, dear, weeks ago. I was just waiting for the right time to tell you. Margaret turned her attention to Marcus. So you see, Mr. Thornton, you have no legal claim whatsoever. And if you continue to harass this young woman, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and making threats. Sheriff Daniels is a good friend of mine. He takes a very dim view of men who abuse women. Marcus's face had gone red with rage. You can't do this. I own her. I own everything she is and everything she has. You own nothing, Juliana said, finding her voice and her courage. You never did. I'm not a possession to be claimed. I'm a person, Marcus. A person with rights and dignity and the freedom to choose my own life. And I choose to never see you again. Shoot them, Marcus snapped at his hired men. Shoot them all. But the hired men were looking at the 4 armed ranch hands and Xander with his rifle, and apparently deciding that their pay wasn't worth dying for. One of them shook his head. This ain't what we signed up for, Thornton. You said we were just coming to collect your wife. You didn't say nothing about a shooting war. I'll double your pay, not interested. Come on, Frank, let's get back to Phoenix. The 2 men turned their horses and started riding away. Marcus stood alone, facing Xander and the ranch hands, and for the first time, Juliana saw him for what he really was. Not a powerful, terrifying figure, but a petty, cruel man who'd always relied on money and intimidation because he had nothing else. Without his hired guns, without the ability to control through violence and fear, he was nothing. Get off my land, Xander said quietly. And if you ever come near Juliana again, if you even write her a letter or send her a message, I'll hunt you down myself. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Now ride. Marcus remounted his horse, his movements jerky with suppressed fury. "This isn't over," he said again, but the words rang hollow. "Yes," Juliana said clearly. "It is. Goodbye, Marcus. I hope I never see you again." They watched him ride away until he was just a speck in the distance. Only then did Juliana allow her legs to give out. Xander caught her, holding her against his chest while she shook with reaction. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "He's gone. You're safe. You're free." "I can't believe he actually left." Bullies always back down when someone stands up to them, and you stood up to him beautifully. Xander pulled back to look at her face. "You were so brave." "I was terrified. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. And you did that. I'm so proud of you." Margaret joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. "Let's go inside. I think we all need some coffee and pie. Maybe something stronger than coffee." They spent the rest of the day in a kind of daze, the adrenaline slowly wearing off, replaced by giddy relief. Juliana kept looking at the papers Margaret had given her, the official documents that declared her marriage dissolved, that gave her back her freedom. She'd been so focused on running and hiding that she'd never even considered legal remedies might exist. "Why didn't you tell me what you were doing?" she asked Margaret as they sat together on the porch that evening. "I didn't want to get your hopes up until I was certain, and I wanted you to have the choice about when and how to use them. They were always yours, Juliana. I just held them until you needed them. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, just by being part of our lives. You've made my son happier than I've seen him in years. You've brought joy back to this house. That's all the thanks I need." Xander found Juliana later, after Margaret had gone to bed. She was standing by the corral, watching the horses shift and doze in the moonlight. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Free," she said, and realized it was true. "For the first time in 6 years, I actually feel free. The fear is gone. He can't hurt me anymore." "He was never going to hurt you again. I wouldn't have let him." She turned in his arms to face him. "I know. And that's one of the many reasons I love you, Xander Kane." His face lit up with joy. "You love me. I love you. I think I have for weeks, but I was too afraid to say it, but I'm not afraid anymore. Of anything." Xander kissed her with a passion that stole her breath, his hands framing her face like she was something precious and rare. When he finally pulled back, he was grinning. "Marry me." Juliana laughed, giddy with happiness. "That's not much of a proposal, you're right. Let me try again." He took her hands, suddenly serious. "Juliana Owens, you are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. You've survived things that would have broken most people, and instead of being bitter or hard, you've somehow remained kind and hopeful. You make me want to be a better man. You make every day brighter just by being in it. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Would you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, slower this time, a kiss full of promise and passion, and the future they were choosing together. They married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch. The guest list was short: Margaret, Henry, the ranch hands, a few friends from town, and the preacher from the local church. Juliana wore a dress Margaret had worn at her own wedding, altered to fit and updated with new lace. Xander wore his Sunday best and couldn't stop grinning. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, Juliana felt a moment of panic, half expecting Marcus to burst through the door. But there was only supportive silence. When Xander slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother, Juliana felt the last of her fears finally release their hold. They held the reception in the barn, which had been swept clean and decorated with wildflowers and paper lanterns. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Juliana danced with Xander with Henry, with several of the ranch hands who were surprisingly graceful despite their rough appearances. Margaret cried happy tears and hugged Juliana so tight she could barely breathe. "Welcome to the family, daughter," Margaret whispered. "Officially this time." As the sun set and the celebration continued, Xander pulled Juliana outside for a moment of privacy. They walked to the cottonwood tree by the creek, their special place. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible. I keep waiting for something to go wrong for this to turn out to be a dream." "It's not a dream, it's real, we're real, and we have the rest of our lives to be happy together." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. Thank you for seeing past my fear to who I really was underneath. Thank you for being patient and kind and everything Marcus wasn't. I promise you, Juliana, every day for the rest of our lives, I'm going to show you what real love looks like, the kind that builds up instead of tearing down, the kind that gives instead of taking, the kind that makes you feel safe instead of scared. I know you will, and I promise to do the same for you, to be your partner in everything, to build this life together." They stood together under the stars, holding each other, two people who'd found each other against all odds and chosen to create something beautiful from the broken pieces of the past. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. The future that started today. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, but a joyful one. Juliana threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, determined to be a true partner to Xander. She took over managing the household finances, discovering she had a head for numbers. She expanded the chicken operation, selling eggs in town. She continued working with the horses, developing a reputation in the area for her ability to gentle difficult animals. Xander was everything a husband should be. He was considerate and affectionate, passionate, but never demanding. He made her laugh every day. He valued her opinions and consulted her on major decisions about the ranch. When she had bad days, when the shadows of the past crept back in, he was there with steady support and unconditional love. Margaret remained an integral part of their lives, though she'd given them the master bedroom and moved to the smaller room Juliana had first occupied. The three of them worked together seamlessly, a family unit that functioned with affection and mutual respect. In the second year of their marriage, Juliana discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mixture of joy and terror. She'd wanted children, had dreamed of being a mother, but she couldn't help remembering how Marcus had reacted when she'd been pregnant once before. He'd been furious, viewing the pregnancy as an inconvenience, and when she'd miscarried at 3 months, he'd blamed her for it. Xander's reaction could not have been more different. When she told him, sitting on their bed one evening with her heart hammering, he stared at her for a long moment in stunned silence. Then he whooped with joy, picked her up carefully, and spun her around before setting her down and dropping to his knees to press his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your father. I just want you to know that you're already the most loved child in the world. Your mother is the strongest, bravest person I know, and I'm going to do everything in my power to be worthy of being your pa." Juliana ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. "You're not upset?" He looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears of his own. "Upset? Juliana, this is the best news I've ever received. We're going to be parents. We're going to have a family. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the Arizona heat made the summer months challenging. Xander was attentive to the point of being comical, constantly asking if she needed anything, insisting she rest more, worrying over every twinge and ache. Margaret laughed at his hovering but clearly approved of how devoted he was. "Your father was the same way when I was carrying Xander," she told Juliana. "Drove me half mad with his fussing. But it's nice to be cared for like that, isn't it?" "It really is," Juliana agreed. "I never thought I'd feel safe having a child, but with Xander I do." In late February of 1884, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the next day, Juliana gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James, after Xander's father, with the middle name Thomas after Juliana's father. When the midwife placed the squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, Juliana felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it nearly stopped her heart. Xander sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, staring at their son with wonder. "He's perfect," he breathed. "Look at him, Juliana. We made him. He's ours." "He has your nose," Juliana said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Poor kid, but he has your eyes, I think. Green, like spring grass." Margaret bustled around the room, tidying up, but she kept stopping to peer at her grandson with unabashed adoration. "He's a Kane through and through. Strong lungs, that's for certain." The first months of parenthood were exhausting but magical. James was a good baby overall, but he still needed constant care. Xander was an involved father from the start, taking his turn walking the floor with a fussy infant at 2 in the morning, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and marveling at tiny fingers and toes. "I never knew I could love someone this much," he told Juliana one night as they stood over James's cradle, watching him sleep. "I thought I understood love when I fell for you, but this is different, just as powerful but different. I know exactly what you mean." Sometimes I look at him, and I'm so overwhelmed with love and fear that I can barely breathe. I want to protect him from everything. We'll protect him together. And we'll raise him to be strong and kind, the kind of man who makes the world better just by being in it. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Word of Juliana's skill with horses spread, and people began bringing their problem animals to her. She charged fair rates and developed a thriving side business. Xander expanded their cattle operation, buying adjacent land when it became available. They hired more hands and built a new barn. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James took his first steps at 11 months. His first word was "Pa," and he showed every sign of inheriting his parents' love of horses. Margaret doted on him shamelessly, and he adored his grandmother in return. When James was 3, Juliana became pregnant again. This time the news was met with calm joy rather than shock. They'd hoped for more children, had been planning for them. The pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Juliana knew what to expect. In October of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Margaret, after no one in particular, but with a middle name honoring the grandmother who would undoubtedly spoil her rotten. Sarah was a quieter baby than James had been, content to observe the world with serious dark eyes that came from somewhere deep in the family genetics. James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Xander had to carefully supervise to make sure the toddler's help didn't cause more problems than it solved. But watching her husband with their children, seeing the infinite patience and love he showed them, made Juliana fall in love with him all over again every single day. "Sometimes I think about where I was 5 years ago," she told Xander one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky while their children slept inside. "I was running and scared and so alone. I never imagined I could have this. A home, a family, peace." "You deserve all of it and more," Xander said, pulling her close. "Every bit of happiness, every moment of joy, you fought for it, Juliana. You survived and you built something beautiful out of the ashes. We built it, she corrected. Together. Together, he agreed, kissing the top of her head. The years passed in a blur of work and laughter, challenges and triumphs. The children grew. James became a serious, responsible boy who could handle horses with a skill that made his parents proud. Sarah was quieter but just as determined, with a gift for gentling even the most nervous animals that surpassed even her mother's abilities. Margaret aged gracefully, her hair going fully gray, her movements slower but her mind sharp as ever. She remained the heart of the household until she passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72, when James was 10 and Sarah 7. Her loss hit them all hard, but they drew comfort from knowing she'd lived a full life and had died happy, surrounded by the family she loved. They buried her next to Xander's father and sister beneath the cottonwood tree by the creek. She loved this spot, Xander said at the funeral, his voice thick with grief. She used to come here to talk to Pa and Emma. Now she can be with them always. Juliana held him while he cried, and later he held her while she released her own grief for the woman who'd been more of a mother to her than her own mother had lived to be. They supported each other through the loss, just as they'd supported each other through everything else. Life continued. The ranch expanded. They hired more hands. Xander taught James the business of ranching while Juliana taught Sarah the art of horse training. The children attended the small school in Vulture City, making friends, living the kind of normal, stable childhood neither Xander nor Juliana had fully experienced. When James was 18, he started courting a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner. Her name was Alice, and she was sweet and practical and perfect for him. They married when James was 19, and Alice moved to the ranch, fitting seamlessly into the family. Sarah was less interested in romance, more focused on her horses and her work. She was 16 now, beautiful and independent, with her mother's determination and her father's steady temperament. She talked about starting her own horse training business, and Xander and Juliana encouraged her dreams. It was a warm evening in early summer, 1899, when Juliana and Xander found themselves alone on the porch. James and Alice were in their own small house that had been built on the eastern edge of the property. Sarah was reading in her room. The ranch was quiet, peaceful. "Can you believe it's been 17 years?" Juliana asked, leaning against Xander's shoulder. They were both in their early 40s now, their hair showing threads of gray, their faces marked with the lines of years spent outdoors. 17 years since we married. 18 since you stumbled into my life bleeding and terrified, and so damn brave you took my breath away. Xander kissed her temple. "Best decision I ever made, helping you that day. Best decision I ever made, staying when everything in me screamed to run. Do you ever regret it?" "The life we built here, I know it's not fancy. The work is hard, the money's not always easy." Juliana turned to look at him fully, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "Xander Kane, I have never regretted a single moment. You gave me back my life. You taught me what real love looks like. You gave me beautiful children and a home and a purpose. How could I ever regret that? I just want to make sure you're happy. I'm more than happy, I'm content, I'm fulfilled. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be with exactly who I'm supposed to be with." She kissed him softly. "I love you. More now than I did 17 years ago, and I thought that was impossible. I love you too. Always have. Always will." They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands, talking about nothing and everything. About James and Alice's plans to have children soon, making them grandparents. About Sarah's ambitions. About whether they should buy the Johnson property that had just gone up for sale. About the ordinary, extraordinary life they'd built together, inside the house, Sarah closed her book and smiled, hearing her parents' laughter drifting through the open window. She'd grown up surrounded by love and stability, had never known fear or violence or the need to run. Her parents had built that for her, had created a safe, nurturing world out of pain and survival. She was grateful every day, even if she didn't always say it. The years continued to unfold. James and Alice had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, who became the light of Xander and Juliana's lives. Sarah eventually met a horse trader from California, a kind man named Robert who appreciated her independence and skill. They married when she was 23, and while they traveled for his work, they always came back to the ranch for extended stays. Xander and Juliana grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They handed over more of the daily ranch operations to James and his family, content to take advisory roles, to spend their time with their grandchildren, to simply enjoy the peaceful life they'd built. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Xander took Juliana back to the cottonwood tree by the creek. It was their special place, the spot where so many important moments in their life together had happened. The tree had grown larger, its branches spreading wide, offering generous shade. 25 years, Xander said, pulling a small box from his pocket. I got you something. Juliana opened it to find a beautiful necklace, a delicate gold chain with a pendant shaped like a horse. Xander, it's beautiful. Turn it over. She did and found an inscription on the back. Our future starts today. Always. X. Tears filled her eyes as she remembered that day 18 years ago when she'd whispered about her past and he'd given her those words that changed everything. You remembered. How could I forget? That was the day you let me in. The day you started to trust me. The day our real future began. He fastened the necklace around her neck. I want you to wear this and remember that every day is a new beginning, that we choose each other, choose this life, choose love over and over again. I'll wear it always, she promised, and I'll remember. How could I forget? You saved my life that day, Xander. No, you saved your own life. I just had the incredible luck of being there when you needed someone. The courage was all yours. They kissed beneath the cottonwood tree, the Arizona sun warm on their faces, the sound of the creek burbling nearby. 25 years of marriage, 18 years since that fateful day in Vulture City, and Juliana still felt the same flutter in her chest when Xander kissed her. Still felt safe in his arms. Still marveled at the life they'd built from nothing but determination and love. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, they could see their family gathered on the porch. James and Alice with their children, Sarah and Robert visiting from California, the ranch hands who'd become extended family over the years. Everyone had gathered to celebrate their anniversary, to honor the love that had been the foundation of this family, this life, this home. Look at what we built, Juliana whispered, pausing to take it all in. Look at all these people, this place. This all came from choosing to stay, choosing to trust, choosing you. No, Xander corrected gently. It came from both of us choosing each other. From partnership and respect and real love. From 2 broken people deciding to heal together. That's what built all this. They joined their family, accepting hugs and congratulations, cutting into the cake Alice had made, laughing at the stories their children told about them. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Juliana looked around at the faces of the people she loved and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She'd been 23 and terrified when she'd stumbled into Vulture City with a bullet graze and a past that haunted her every step. She'd thought she'd never feel safe again, never trust again, certainly never love again. She'd been so wrong. Xander caught her eye from across the porch and smiled, that same smile that had captivated her 18 years ago. She smiled back, touching the necklace at her throat, and mouthed, "I love you." He mouthed it back, and in that moment, Juliana understood something profound. The past didn't have to define you. Pain didn't have to destroy you. With courage and love and the right person by your side, you could build something beautiful from the ashes. You could create a future that honored your survival without being imprisoned by your history. That night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Juliana and Xander lay together in the darkness of their bedroom. Xander's arm was around her and her head rested on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me that day, for helping me, for loving me even when I didn't know how to love myself anymore, for giving me all of this. Juliana, you don't have to thank me for loving you. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we built. That's all because of you, your strength, your courage. It's because of us," she insisted. "Together, always together." "Always," he agreed, pulling her closer. "I love you, Juliana Kane, my brave, beautiful, incredible wife. I love you too, Xander. My hero, my partner, my home." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built a love story for the ages. Outside, the Arizona night was vast and starlit, full of promise and peace. The ranch that had been Xander's birthright and Juliana's salvation would continue to thrive for generations. James would pass it to his children, who would pass it to theirs. The Kane name would become synonymous with fair dealing, good horses, and strong values throughout Arizona territory and beyond. But always, at the heart of it, would be the story of Juliana and Xander, the woman who ran from her past and the cowboy who taught her to embrace her future. The love that began with a bullet graze and kindness from a stranger and grew into something unshakable and eternal. Years later, when they were both gray and weathered by time and life, when their children had grown and their grandchildren were having children of their own, Juliana and Xander would still sit on that porch together every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset. Still in love. Still choosing each other. Still grateful for the day their paths crossed in a dusty Arizona town. And sometimes, when the light was right and the evening was quiet, Juliana would touch the necklace she still wore every day and remember. She'd remember the fear and the pain and the desperate flight that brought her to Vulture City. She'd remember the kindness of strangers who became family. She'd remember whispered confessions and gentle promises. Most of all, she'd remember Xander's words that changed everything. "We all do, but our future starts today." Those words had been true that day, and they remained true every day after. The future was always starting, always unfolding, always offering new possibilities to those brave enough to reach for them. And Juliana, with Xander by her side, had been brave enough. She'd reached for love and found it. She'd reached for healing and found it. She'd reached for home and built it with her own two hands and the help of a cowboy who saw past her scars to the strength underneath. In the end, that's what love was. Not possession or control or demands. Not fear or pain or the need to run. Love was seeing someone fully, scars and all, and choosing them anyway. It was building something together, brick by brick, day by day. It was holding on through the storms and celebrating in the sunshine. It was partnership and respect and laughter and passion, and the quiet contentment of growing old with your best friend. Juliana and Xander had all of that and more. They had a love story that would be told and retold by their descendants, becoming legend. The woman with a past and the cowboy who gave her a future. The bullet that missed and the strangers who became soulmates. The ranch in Arizona where two broken people became whole. And every year on their anniversary, their children and grandchildren would gather beneath the cottonwood tree by the creek to hear the story again. To remember that love could conquer fear, that kindness could change lives, that tomorrow was always a new beginning for those brave enough to claim it. The story of Juliana and Xander became part of the ranch's legacy, woven into its very foundation. And long after they were gone, when new generations walked the land they'd built together, their love remained. In the wind through the cottonwood tree, in the horses running free in the pastures, in the house that sheltered their descendants, in the very soil that had absorbed their tears and their laughter and their unwavering commitment to each other. They lived into their 70s, both of them, blessed with good health and sharp minds until near the end. Xander passed first, peacefully in his sleep with Juliana beside him, holding his hand just as she'd held it for over 50 years of marriage. He died with a smile on his face, surrounded by love, having lived a life of purpose and meaning. Juliana followed him 6 months later, unable to bear the separation for long. She died in the same bed where they'd shared 50 years of married life, where their children had been conceived and born, where they'd laughed and loved and built their partnership. Sarah was with her at the end, holding her hand just as she'd held Xander's. "Tell him I'm coming," Juliana whispered with her last breath. "Tell him our future is still starting. Tell him I love him." And Sarah, tears streaming down her face, promised she would. Though she knew her father already knew. How could he not? The love between Juliana and Xander had been so powerful, so evident, that it transcended death itself. They buried Juliana beside Xander, beneath the cottonwood tree where so much of their story had unfolded. The entire town of Vulture City turned out for the funeral, along with people from Phoenix and beyond. Juliana Kane had touched many lives with her gentleness and her skill with horses. But more than that, she'd inspired people with her story. The woman who'd overcome abuse and fear to build something beautiful. The woman who'd proven that the past didn't have to define the future. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, they engraved the words that had changed her life. Our future starts today. And in the hearts of all who knew them, Juliana and Xander lived on. Their love story became the gold standard by which all others were measured in that part of Arizona. Parents would tell their children, "Find someone who loves you like Xander loved Juliana. Be someone who loves like they did." The ranch continued to prosper under James's guidance, and then under his children's. The Kane horses became famous throughout the Southwest, sought after for their temperament and training. Everyone knew that the Kane method of horse training came from Juliana, passed down through the generations, a living legacy of her skill and patience. Sarah's children became renowned horse trainers in their own right, carrying their grandmother's gift to California and beyond. The Kane name spread, always synonymous with integrity, skill, and the kind of love that built dynasties. But the heart of it all remained that dusty afternoon in July 1882, when a terrified young woman with a bullet graze and a desperate need for help stumbled into the path of a cowboy with a kind heart and steady hands. When two broken people looked at each other and saw possibility instead of pain. When a simple choice to stay, to trust, to love, changed the course of two lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. The future had started that day, just as Xander promised. And it was a future filled with more joy, more love, more beauty than either of them could have imagined in that moment of first meeting. It was a future built on the ashes of the past, proof that redemption was always possible, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that tomorrow was always another chance to begin again. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not the pain that came before, but the love that came after. Not the fear that drove Juliana to run, but the courage that let her stay. Not the past that haunted her, but the future she claimed for herself. Their story ended as all stories must, but the love they built lived on. In their descendants, in the ranch they created, in the lives they touched, in the example they set. Juliana and Xander Kane, a woman with a past and a cowboy who saw only her future, proved that love conquers all. Not easily, not without struggle, but completely and eternally. Their future had started that day in Vulture City, and it never truly ended. It continued in every sunset watched from that porch, every horse trained with their methods, every child told their story, every person who found courage to leave their own painful past behind and reach for something better. The future always starts today. That was the truth Xander taught Juliana, and together they proved it every single day of their long, love-filled lives. And that truth, like their love, became immortal.